Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. Today we're on the estate planning of the rich and famous topic, and today's episode is on Howard Hughes, who I believe was one of the richest people on the planet for a good long time. Let's talk a little bit about Howard, like who he was, his family, and how did he become so wealthy, and then chat about his estate following his death. Before we get started, I have to give a word of caution that I may cough a little bit through this episode. I have a tickle in my throat that I can't get rid of. Very annoying, but nonetheless, I need to get this recorded. So here we are. Alrighty, according to biography.com, Howard Hughes was born in December of 1905 in Houston, Texas. As a baby, he was born into money. You see, he was the son of quite the successful oil drill tool manufacturer and actually ended up inheriting the family business at the arguably too young age of 18. A few years later, he used some of that wealth to foot the bill of a couple films, like Hell's Angels in 1930, Scarface in 1932, and The Outlaw in 1941. Further, according to biography.com, Howard had quite the passion for aviation. Not only did he fly, but he also founded his own aircraft company in the 1930s. His love for flying came to a near abrupt end when Howard was involved in a plane crash in 1946. Although he survived, supposedly after the event, he became a recluse, and as biography.com states, quote, began to retreat from the world. After the accident and into the 1960s, he actually chose to reside on the top floor of the Desert Inn in Las Vegas, though very, very few people saw him, ever. And due to this, many started questioning his behavior more and more, and some claim, according to biography.com, that he suffered from obsessive-compulsive disorder and had a drug problem. All of a sudden, he decided to leave Las Vegas, and he ended up taking off to live abroad in Mexico. Why, you ask? Well, I guess why not? Though unfortunately, in April 1976, Howard died at the age of 70 years old. As a New York Times article stated, quote, Howard R. Hughes died as mysteriously as he lived, end quote. It was odd because Howard was on his way to Texas from Mexico for emergency treatment, though on his commute from Texas to Mexico by plane, he died in air. He passed away due to a stroke. So estate plan-wise, Howard passed away without any estate plan, but not so fast, because some people came forward with what they claimed to be Howard's will, or what they claimed to be valid marriages. Yes, you heard me right, marriages. And even people that came forward claiming to be adopted or illegitimate children of Howard. So which one do we want to start with? Well, let's start with the supposed will. According to a blog by the law offices of Jeffrey G. Mersaki, supposedly a man found Howard not in great shape in Nevada in December of 1967, and the man gave Howard a ride to his hotel. Well, the man claimed that a few days after Howard passed away, a will was delivered to him, and that will gave him $156 million. Well, that ended up in the estate. Litigation ensued, and ultimately, the court said that the will was forged. This was such a huge thing that a movie actually came out called Melvin and Howard in 1980, and I think it even won an Oscar. Okay, so no will there. Then these marriages, let's talk about them. Well, first, a lady by the name of Terry Moore, who is an actress, came forward and attempted to claim that her and Howard got married in 1949 on a ship off the coast of California. And the marriage papers were supposedly dumped overboard. Since her supposed marriage to Howard, she had married and divorced 3 other men. So ultimately, the judge threw the claim out. A second lady by the name of Alice Hughes, interesting last name, said her and Howard got married in 1946. There were some interesting allegations from Alice, but again, the judge threw out her claim. Lastly, a third woman came forward by the name of Alma Hughes. Again, Alma provided some interesting allegations against Howard, but claimed that they married in 1973. The judge ultimately threw out her claim as well. And side note, if you want something interesting to read, check out the Washington Post article in my source links for this episode. Oh my goodness, those allegations. Shoo. And finally, let's talk about the couple claims by people who claim to be adopted or illegitimate children. So one gentleman by the name of Donald McDonald, I wish I was joking, but he also said that he went by Richard Hughes. Anyways, Richard Hughes stated that Howard adopted him in 1953. The judge threw out this claim. But there was also a lady, and this is a whole nother, situation. There was a lady, which the Washington Post claims to be the strangest of them all, but they all seem strange to me. Anyways, her name was Claire Hudenberg. She claimed to be Howard's illegitimate daughter. She was not in court present, though her attorney read a sworn statement from her, and in part it read as follows. Quote, "She is clairvoyant, can hear things from another world, and was a king in 3 previous incarnations. That Harold Robbins novel, The Carpetbaggers, revealed she was Hughes's daughter, and that she bears a remarkable physical resemblance to Hughes, and that she lived next door to him, Hughes, in Bahamas in 1969. End quote. Ultimately, the judge yet again was not persuaded and threw out her claim. So because of all these wild claims getting thrown out, it was decided that Howard died without a will, period, end of story, and the laws of intestacy would govern to provide who is getting what of Howard's estate. So we have talked about these laws of intestacy before plenty of times here on Legal Tea. But in case you're listening from most recent to oldest episode or something, these laws of intestacy basically are a built-in estate plan for people that pass away without a will. And if you think about it, it makes sense because what's the stat? Half the population does not have a will? It's probably more than half, actually. So anyway, these laws dictate how assets are to be distributed if there is no estate plan governing an asset when someone dies. This was somewhat problematic and difficult because Howard had no direct descendants or really any sense of an immediate family. So the court, according to the Washington Post article, after nearly 2 months of testimony and hearings, determined that the following individuals were to receive various unequal shares of Howard's estate. First, we have Howard's uncle's stepdaughter, Avis Hughes McIntyre, and Avis's brother's heirs. Don't think about that too hard. They received 4.75% of the estate. Second was Howard's uncle's granddaughters, and there were 3 of them, Chris Roberts, Beth Dupald, and Barbara Cameron, and each of them received 6.33%. And finally, the third group of beneficiaries was Howard's cousins. And there were 16 of them, and I'm not going to bore you with all their names, but they were given in total 71.5% of the estate. All of that was according to an article on The Grunge, which is linked in the source links for this episode. Actually, crazy enough, so that Grunge article even said some of the people that inherited never even had met Howard, Wow. Which is extra crazy since his estate was worth, depending on who you ask, on the low end, $500 million, and on the higher end, like $1.5 billion. Yes, with a B. And I actually think I read somewhere that in today's standard currency, that would be about $9 billion. Holy cow. Which, when there's that kind of money on the table, it makes sense how many people had their hands out ready to say, hey, I'm Howard's wife, child, cousin, friend, etc. And according to the Washington Post article, more than 600 alleged wives, sons, daughters, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth cousins lined up in this small courtroom on the 5th floor of the Family Law Center on the north edge of downtown Houston with their hands out, trying to claim a share of the Hughes's fortune. All of this was specifically because Howard did not do a will or any estate plan. And someone of his caliber would have certainly benefited from planning involving trusts. But I digress. Along these lines, it always blows my mind when I hear of celebrities, big name people like Howard, that do not have a will or any estate plan. I mean, how many people on these estate planning of the rich and famous episodes have we covered where the celebrities did not have an estate plan? So many. It blows my mind because they have teams of lawyers and financial professionals around them. Is it that these people are flat refusing to sit down and talk about their estate? Is it the professionals not bringing it up? Is it both? Every time it happens, I think they have so much money, so much so that why would they not want to be in the driver's seat about who gets what? And so often, the lack of planning leads to conflicts, confusion, increased legal fees, fighting with the IRS, etc., etc. And they didn't intentionally want things left like that, right? It took Howard's estate 34 years to wrap up. 34 years. And Howard's estate went to family members he had never met. But you know what? He has no one to blame but himself. And same goes for anyone that does not do their estate plan. Oftentimes when I hear of family conflicts in estates, it's so often specifically due to the decedent, the person that passed away, and something they did, or they didn't do, or they said, or didn't say, or didn't write down, or even that they wanted to play Mr. Nice Guy and wouldn't have tough conversations. Or maybe they waited until the 11th hour and it became too late. And you may be thinking, well, that's really nice of you, Jenny, to blame it on the dead person. But it's true. And yes, families fight over even the cleanest of plans. But I'd say many, many, many families fight due to things directly due to the deceased person. And things that they may have been able to control, but did not. As we wrap up this episode, my message to you is you have to take ownership and control of your estate plan. Not only do you need to #do your estate plan, which is obvious, but so many people don't do it. But it also needs to be done well. Tough conversations need to be had, things need to be in writing, and you need to be totally honest with your estate planning attorney. I often tell clients that I 100% know and understand it's not an enjoyable thing to have to air out dirty laundry with your lawyer. It's not fun to talk about your kiddo that is terrible with money, or the beneficiary that has a spouse that you're massively concerned about, or a kid that's into drugs, alcohol, or gambling, or the beneficiary that you want to cut out, or a beneficiary that you don't want to get an equal share. If you don't tell us these things, we won't know about them, and we can't get your plan and file in a position to defend your wishes. especially if World War III were to break out over your estate. So just tell us. I promise. Most families have something going on that they aren't thrilled to talk to me about. You just have to be brave enough to share it. So I, as the estate planning attorney or your estate planning attorney, can protect you and your wishes. Okay, let's wrap this episode up. Next week, we're back to a cautionary tale episode where we talk about real life cases and clients that I or my office have worked on. And during that episode, we're going to be talking about how even, really simple wills should have things like a basic testamentary trust to support minor children, even if we're talking about grandchildren, if they were to inherit. Or testamentary trust to support individuals that receive governmental benefits like Medicaid or Social Security. This topic is actually why I sometimes giggle when people say, "Now, Jenny, all I need is a really simple will." So we'll dive into that next Tuesday, Legal Tea listeners. Until then, take care and be well.